While zombies and horror games have been around long before the 90s, let's face it, the original Resident Evil was the game that really made them popular in horror games. In fact, it was Resident Evil that inspired so many horror games to follow in its footsteps, and now today, there's plenty of iconic zombie horror games out there to choose from. So on the 6th day of the 31 days of Halloween, we're taking a look at the best zombie horror games out there that's not named Resident Evil. Because yeah, clearly RE wins that by a massive margin. Some of these games might not necessarily feature the scariest zombies in horror games, but they do feature a ton of flesh-eating zombies and monsters for you to destroy in various ways, and who doesn't love that, right? Before we get started though, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel for more survival horror content. Also hit that like button if you enjoyed today's topic. Anyway, my name is Ruben with Nerdspace Games, and this is the top 10 best zombie horror games that's not named Resident Evil. Let's get it. Number 10, Dead Rising. While Capcom created the scariest zombie horror franchise in the form of Resident Evil, they also created one of the goofiest yet satisfying take on the zombie genre in the form of Dead Rising. In the original game, you play as Frank West, a reporter who jumps headfirst into the middle of a zombie outbreak at the Willamette Mall. This massive mall is full of all sorts of shops, weapons, outfits, maniacs, and you guessed it, zombies. The best part about Dead Rising is the amount of ways you can take on the hordes of zombies inside a Willamette Mall, from pushing a shopping cart through hundreds of zombies to a lawnmower that can literally mow down the zombies in your path. The amount of weapons at your disposal here are legit limitless. Number 9, The X-Files, Resist or Serve. Okay, so here's a little niche one for you guys that on paper you wouldn't guess it was a zombie horror game, but fans of classic survival horror will probably love to hear that the X-Files game, Resist or Serve, is actually a pretty damn good old school survival horror. Yeah, a horror game based on a horror TV show is actually pretty damn good. Who knew? In all seriousness, this game has everything that you could possibly want from a game inspired by classic Resident Evil. Small town full of zombies? Check. Two protagonists with separate campaigns? Check. Puzzles that involve finding and combining different items to solve? Check. Limited resources combined with a kick-ass inventory management screen? Check. Hell, you even got fixed camera angles and the main cast of the TV show reprising their roles for this game. What more could you possibly ask for? Well, there is one downer. The boss fights in the game are pretty rough to say the least, but for a zombie game inspired by a horror TV show, it's honestly not a bad game, and I highly recommend it to fans of OG Resident Evil specifically. Number 8, Dead Island 2. If Dead Rising was Capcom's goofier take on the zombie subgenre, then Dead Island 2 was the same thing but on a much bigger scale and in first person. The game never really takes itself seriously, even the story is kind of a joke. However, that playful style is exactly why playing Dead Island 2 is one of the more addicting and fun experiences that you can find in the zombie genre. Just like Dead Rising, you can find all sorts of weapons to use at your disposal and upgrade and enhance them to make them more powerful for different situations. You also get a handful of protagonists to choose from, each one with their own personality and style to handle the different situations you encounter throughout the game. Personally, I've always loved Amy and Jacob's personality the most, but I'd love to hear which Slayer you preferred in the comments down below. You can even play with two friends throughout the entire game, which makes this a lot more exciting in my opinion. I love Dead Island 2, and while it may not be the scariest zombie horror game out there, it's definitely up there as one of the most fun to enjoy with your friends. Number 7, Chronos: The New Dawn. There are some entries on today's list that fit into the gray area in terms of what is considered a zombie horror game, and Chronos: The New Dawn is one of those games. The main enemy types in the game are called orphans, zombie-like creatures with a mysterious origin centered around Poland in the 1960s that the survivors call the Change. Like zombies, orphans are created from a disease that can be spread from one person to the other, which ultimately created an outbreak that nearly wiped out the entire population on Earth. Unlike zombies though, orphans have the ability to fuse with each other, which makes them super zombies essentially and hard to put down. While the story isn't the most interesting aspect of Chronos: The New Dawn, the gameplay is actually pretty intriguing. You have all sorts of weapons and abilities to help you take down these alien zombies, and you also have a charge shot ability which allows you to make each bullet more powerful. Actually, on the topic of bullets, you better be charging as many shots as possible because Chronos is a hardcore survival horror game in terms of its limited resources and inventory management, as you'll constantly find yourself low on bullets or even needing that last final shot to take down the boss. Trust me, it happened to me a lot throughout my first playthrough. Ultimately though, Chronos: The New Dawn is the perfect mix between action horror and modern survival horror, and since orphans are basically zombie aliens, sure, I'll count it as a zombie horror game. Number 6, Dying Light. Dying Light has a lot of similarities to other open world zombie horror games like Dead Rising and Dead Island, in which you have a ton of options for resources and weapons to use against the infected. Unlike those games though, Dying Light takes on a more serious tone instead of the goofiness you see in both Dead Island and Dead Rising. You can still take out zombies in some pretty hilarious ways, but most of the time the combat is just more brutal and gruesome versus comedic. There are also 2 other key traits about Dying Light that makes it one of the most exciting zombie horror games to play. First off, parkour is a key part in Dying Light, as you'll want to explore this massive city, but being on the ground puts you at risk of being overwhelmed by zombies. So your parkour abilities allow you to jump from rooftop to rooftop and zipline your way across buildings, which honestly makes you feel like a true badass in the middle of this apocalypse. The second trait that I really love about Dying Light, and I was reminded of how awesome this feature was when I played Dying Light the Beast for the first time a few weeks ago, are the night runs. See, when the sun falls and the night rises, all hell breaks loose as you'll have these super zombies known as volatiles chasing you through the streets. Unlike regular zombies, volatiles are much stronger and faster and will literally chase your ass down all the way to the ends of the earth if you let them. Your best course of action when you run into one of these volatiles is to get to a safe haven as fast as possible, or else you'll get wrecked fast. Oh, and did I mention that the protagonist, Kyle Crane, is voiced by the extremely talented Roger Craig Smith, aka the voice actor for Chris Redfield in Resident Evil 5? Yeah, absolutely love that. And he's back for Dying Light the Beast too, so definitely go check out that game as well, because I had a lot of fun playing the Beast as well, so yeah, check that game out. Number 5, Forbidden Siren, also known as Siren. So I wasn't sure if I should technically include this game or not, since the enemies in the Forbidden Siren series are actually known as Shibito, not traditional zombies. I mean, they are basically described as zombies as they are reanimated corpses, but unlike zombies, they still have their personality and intelligence, which allows them to do more than zombies do. Regardless, if you don't like this entry here, then I don't know, just throw World War Z at the bottom of today's list and call it a day. Moving on, Forbidden Siren, aka Siren, is a survival horror game that takes place in a small village in Japan. As I stated earlier, the main enemy types are Shibito, which are basically reanimated corpses of the villagers that lived in this town. Since they still have their intelligence, at least to a certain degree they do, they are able to fire weapons and do other things that traditional zombies can't. What makes Forbidden Siren specifically so interesting is a mechanic known as sightjacking, which allows you to see from the perspective of a Shibito near you. This allows you to strategically maneuver your way through the most dangerous areas of the game. It's a terrifying game, and if you're a fan of J-horror specifically, chances are you'll definitely love this game for sure. Number 4, The Walking Dead Telltale series. The Walking Dead Telltale series was the peak of Telltale games, as they created one of the most emotional stories ever seen in a video game. Specifically, Season 1 still remains as one of the most impactful video games I've ever played, and I still can't get over the constant rollercoaster ride that the first season put us on with Clementine and Lee's story. Anyway, as the name suggests, this franchise takes place in the Walking Dead universe. However, it does so near the start of the outbreak. In the first season, we play as Lee, who finds Clementine, a young girl who is hiding out in a treehouse to keep away from the walkers roaming around. What follows is one of the most heartfelt stories, as Lee must make choices throughout the game to protect Clementine, himself, and the people he cares about, and with each choice comes a consequence. The Walking Dead Telltale series isn't really known for the gameplay, as there's little to no gameplay actually. The important aspects of these games are the stories that they tell and the branching narratives, as each choice you make could lead to the death of a character that you really like. Trust me, it gets pretty tough, and there's multiple times where you'll find yourself in the position of not knowing which choice to make. Number 3, Left 4 Dead 2. Okay, so outside of Resident Evil, Left 4 Dead 2 might very well be the zombie game that I played the most. Seriously, when this game first came out, I was all about it on the 360, and that's all I would play non-stop for like ever. I remember being obsessed with just getting every single achievement in the game and completing every single campaign on the hardest difficulty because I love the game that much. Anyway, the game consists of multiple campaigns in which you can play as one of 4 survivors. Well, technically 8, but you know what I mean. Throughout the campaigns, you must work together as a team to fight hordes of zombies, special infected with different abilities, witches that could instantly kill you, and giant ass monsters known as tanks. However, the most fun comes in the form of the online versus mode, which turns this already incredible zombie experience into an asymmetrical horror game, and one of the best asymmetrical horror games at that. In this mode, you still play as a team of 4, but now for each chapter of the selected campaign, you not only play as the survivors, but you also get the opportunity to play as the special infected, whose role is to stop the survivors at all costs. It makes the game a lot more fun, and while there have been pale imitations to this formula, looking at you Back 4 Blood, nothing will ever compare to what the Left 4 Dead series did all those years ago. Speaking of which, I only feature Left 4 Dead 2 specifically in this spot because 1, the second game later added all of the campaigns and characters from the first game, and 2, I just like some of the maps better in Left 4 Dead 2, like Parish and Dead Center. Number 2, The Last of Us. The Last of Us is one of the best action horror games ever created. I mean, as the whole package. It features some of the best combat in an action horror game, one of the best and most emotional stories in video games, period, and features some of the best characters in horror games in the form of both Joel and Ellie. I absolutely love this game, and there's so much to appreciate about this game. From the relationship of Joel and Ellie and how it builds over time, to the enemy types, which are basically traditional zombies but created from a fungus instead of a virus. On the topic of enemy types, we can't really move on without mentioning one of the most insane monster types in the game, the Clickers. These guys are absolutely terrifying. They instantly kill the player, they look horrifying in the way that they're fused with their hosts, and the sounds they make are extremely unnerving. Anyways, all in all, The Last of Us is a masterpiece, and it's really hard to find any zombie horror game that's better than it. But there is one I can think of, and it's kind of one that once again lands in the gray area of what I would call a zombie game, but let's get to it. Number 1, Dead Space Remake. I'm sure a lot of you figured that I would be featuring Dead Space Remake on this list the moment I decided to include Chronos: The New Dawn, as it's kind of similar. The necromorphs in Dead Space Remake, like the orphans and Chronos, are essentially zombie aliens. So, since we are counting the necromorphs as zombies, clearly Dead Space Remake was going to claim the spot for best zombie horror game that's not named Resident Evil. I mean, it has everything you could possibly want from a zombie horror game. It's easily the most terrifying game on today's list, mostly thanks to the sound design and atmosphere of the Ishimura. The body horror is insane, as the human hosts for this alien species are completely ripped apart in various ways to create different forms of necromorphs. And the amount of weapons and abilities at your disposal makes taking down these creatures a ton of fun. Whether it's the famous plasma cutter that's used to angle your weapon perfectly to cut the limbs off of a necromorph, or the Ripper, which literally just slices through alien zombie flesh, as this bad boy is basically a space chainsaw. You just have so much to choose from. Plus, Status is your best friend in this game, as you can slow enemies down, making enemies easier to kill. You can also use telekinesis to rip limbs off of necromorphs and use those same limbs to impale these guys. This game is just fucking awesome, and it's definitely deserving of the number 1 spot for best zombie horror game that's not named Resident Evil. Enough said. But that does it for this episode of Nerdspace Games. Hit up the comments and let me know what you think of my list. Is Dead Space Remake the best zombie horror game not named Resident Evil, or do you think there's a different game that deserves that title? Let me know down below. Anyway, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to my channel for more survival horror content, especially if you want to stay up to date on the 31 days of Halloween, in which I post a new horror game ranking video every single day in the month of October. And yeah, leave a like on today's video if you enjoyed today's topic. Thanks for watching, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next episode of Nerdspace Games. Take care.